Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Come in, sit down, get comfortable. Hopefully you're already sitting down anyway. You're at your laptops, raring to go on this, I don't know about you, but slightly grey Monday morning. But we're going to bring lots of joy and light and smiles and fun to all things around funding. So welcome. So I am Emma Mills Sheffield, and I'm independent consultant. I have a business called Mind Setup. Today, I'm here on behalf of Small Business Britain to help host this session, and I've got two experts with me today, and I'm really looking forward to this particular webinar. So we've got a Q&A today on Mastering Money, Part 2. Our panel of experts will offer help and advice on your funding options from grants, angel investors, crowdfunding, and everything to help you get set up and on your feet from a finance perspective to get them in order and as part of this mini series. If you missed part 1 last week, we had covered everything cash flow and profitability related. We can send you the recording via email along with today's as well. This is a part of a Small Business Britain and Lloyds Bank Academy partnership to help you on your business journey. Huge thank you, as always, to Lloyds Bank Academy for making today's session possible. So just by attending today, you'll also receive free one-to-one mentoring to help you further. Small Business Britain will send you a link by email for you to sign up to secure your place. So this morning, you're already doing it, and I love it. Get involved in the chat, say hi, say where you come from, what your business is. Get involved. It does get really busy. So if you do have any specific questions that you want to make sure we address, please pop them into the Q&A. That way we know we'll catch them and we'll come back to them throughout the session. Thank you for submitting your questions when you signed up. We have a lot, and I mean a lot in capital letters. We've got so many to get through. So we'll kick off by answering as many of your questions as possible. And then again, as I say, please put them in the Q&A as we kind of work through the content, because often things come up live that you want to get a bit more out of. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists today, and I'm really pleased to be working with Rachel Hayward and Sue Pettigru. So I would love to get a couple of intros, share what your expertise is, why we're all here this morning, and we're absolutely buzzing about finances. So I'm going to start with you, Sue.
Thanks, Emma. So I'm Sue Pettigru of Simple Commercial Finance. So my background is I did 21 years at NatWest, where my last role was as a business banking manager. So helping everything from startup businesses through to the larger turnover, so anything in the SME market. I then progressed into a different bank and now work as a broker, so independent broker that can go out to the whole of the lenders on across the country for any kind of, whether it's asset finance, invoice finance, cash flow finance, commercial mortgages, commercial loans, so anything like that. And the one thing I would say is there's never a silly question. So if you don't know something, just ask.
Perfect. Thank you. I love that. And you've already thrown in some terminology that people are going to be going, oh, so because it's really specific and it's not going to be relevant to every business, but it's going to be hugely relevant to most people. And I mean that because it's really specific, but we can absolutely cover all that as we go today. Thank you, Sue. Rachel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Hayward. My company is Ask the Chameleon. I'm a hired pen. I write funding applications, grant finance applications, and I also write business awards. I'm based in the Midlands. I actually taught myself how to do this. So I like to have lots of silly questions that make me think. I'm actually HR by trade, but I don't perform those dark arts anymore. I've won 117 million for my clients to date, and we write very collaboratively together because I'm not an expert in their businesses.
Fabulous, thank you. So that's 170 million, only 170 million. So that's phenomenal. So this morning we will be talking about grant funding, bidding, tendering, lots of demystifying things, but also how to get money into your business. I've recently finished a grant funding program, and they come from sort of funded pots. And I think when we refer to the words buckets and pots today, we are referring to the money that's out there and where it might be, and often, unfortunately, where it isn't, but which stones we're going to have to lift to be able to find what's underneath them. So I'm going to ask a series of questions as we go this morning. And Sue, can I start with a finance question, please.
Of course.
And this is around what's the most effective way to kind of access funding for cash flow snags? And maybe if it's not funding, where's the money? What do we do?
Hey, that's a really, really good question, Emma. So it's kind of quite a vast area, really. So it's going to really depend on the size of your business and how new you are as well. So there are some people and lenders out there that, you know, are quite specific and need a little bit kind of older business, to be honest. Some of them will say, oh, we need 2 years accounts. But as a kind of a first starting point, if it is cash flow that you need, if you do have an existing bank, which most of you probably will do, I would always speak to them initially and just say, you know, is there something even like an overdraft facility that you could possibly make use of initially? Where that's kind of quite structured against your bank account. So for those of you who don't really understand what that means, in simple terms, it means you've got a facility of money available to you whilst you're paying some bills and some other bills coming in. So exactly the same it would work on a personal account. If not, then I would actually just like Google as well. You have got people, there are some company names like you may have heard of, like Ayahuasca Funding Circle, people like that. Some of them, as I say, need a little bit longer term businesses, but there will be people like myself that you can speak to as a broker to be able to say, this is what I actually specifically need. How can I access that? And, you know, I would hope that there are some quite ethical brokers out there like myself who will actually just point you in the right direction without charging you and such like. So if somebody's like wanting to charge you a fortune, step away and get a recommendation from a friend. There is vast funding out there, Emma, you know, from monies that, you know, will cost you obviously, and there are things that, you know, you can do a bit cheaper. So some of the funding will be expensive depending what it is that you want to do, and some funding is far cheaper, particularly things through like, you know, the British Bank and things like that. So it is really quite a vast thing, so quite hard to kind of narrow it down onto one or two things.
Definitely. Rachel, thank you so much, Sue. Rachel, do you have any experience in this space at all as a business owner yourself?
So I was saying to these guys earlier, I'm a wordsmith. I'm a bit number phobic, and I don't mind admitting that. So, you know how when you start in business, you start because you're really passionate about the thing that you can do, and then you find you have to do all these other things as well that you're not an expert in. So, you know, as Sue said, you know, I ask people for support, for recommendations. But one of the things that I try really hard to do and remind myself is to always know my numbers within my business and not stretch myself too thinly. It happened to me just before COVID, actually, because I had a part-time job whilst I built my business, and then I decided in 2020 that I was going to go full-time. Absolutely smashing timing. And I barely scraped through breaking even that year, and it was a huge kick up the backside. And then COVID hit as well, which just made it even more challenging. But I really dug deep and really explored all my numbers during that period to make sure I knew how much I needed to bring in. And if I wanted to do things, you know, if I wanted to buy a company car because I work from home, I have very minimal outgoings, then I had to put the money aside to be able to do that. So it's about knowing your numbers and having that future plan, and then exploring the options, because they're going to ask you some hard-hitting questions and you need to be able to give them the answers with confidence.
And that's brilliant. You get your own house in order really to start with before you start spreading yourself too thin from you know, an investment perspective. And also, as you say, I think you need to know your numbers, but also there are ways to flatten out cash flow issues by going back to your clients. So it depends what business you have, but especially if it's service led, can you get stage payments? Can you make sure people are paying on, you know, direct debit, or just flattening those things out rather than suddenly having a big, you know, a lump one month in the year? It's like, how can I spread it out to make sure I don't get that sort of, I'm not that exposed.
I know that in the first episode of this series, you know, people were talking about their invoices. I used to invoice at the end of the job, which then meant if my clients weren't always fantastic at paying, and I'm fortunate that my clients aren't like that, but it happens, I was waiting a long time, which was really affecting my cash flow. So I changed my invoicing model. I invoice half up front and then half when the job's done, and I have a 15-day payment term. Now that adds extra admin to me, but that's a very easy pill to swallow, because it actually gives me more positive cash flow ability to run my business and cover the suppliers that I pay out.
Yeah. And the other thing to consider, Emma, as well, is just when you were saying, and what Rachel was saying as well, is if people are seasonal businesses as well, just think about your seasonality. You know, so if you are something where, you know, you are an ice cream seller, you know, you would hope, we've got sun up here today where I'm, so, you know, you'd hope that maybe you're slightly busier today. So it's also about thinking about putting monies aside for future when you know that your business isn't going to be quite as busy, particularly if you are seasonal. But I think putting money aside anyway is important. But yeah, thinking about that and exactly what Rachel was saying too.
Brilliant, thank you. So I want to just ask a question that's a bit of it's a dark art, and Rachel, I want to come to you on this one, because I know this is something you're very familiar with. But in terms of having enough time, so you're running a business day to day, you're absolutely flat out. It's what we do as small business owners. But in terms of finding opportunities for funding or tendering, what are your tips around maybe allocating the right amount of time, or where to look, or not burning yourself out whilst you're also running a business and looking for funding? Rachel.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole conversation in and of itself. So the first thing to say to everybody is, there is not some secret pot of gold at the end of a rainbow that's available for everybody. You have to have the resilience of a rhino to seek these things out, right? And they're not just going to magically waft into your life. It's part of a strategy, and they are out there, but they're not for everybody. They're not for every type of business, and they're not for every stage of business. And that's because there's just not enough money to go around, especially if they're funded by the government. And it's just, so they will allocate according to a priority. And when I say they, this tended to have been up until pre-Brexit, it was our local enterprise partnerships, and now the money has sort of transferred into local authorities. So my first top tip is go to your local authority, find their economic development page, their business support page, and see what there is. Equally, if you're in the area where your growth hub is still operating, then they tend to have e-bulletins that you can sign up to and read them till the end. I know they're very long and wordy, but this is where you'll find snippets of good information. And what tends to happen with these pots of money is all of a sudden they just explode onto your local area. They're available for 6 to 8 weeks and then they're gone. And that's just, again, how it happens. They have very stringent processes to go through. They are accountable for that money. If it's not used, it's sent back. If it's not used properly, it's clawed back from them, you know. And the holders of the purse really do want to give you the money, but their systems are very prescribed. So that's my top tip, is to make friends with your local economic regeneration, economic development department, and start there. And then once you've got that information, this is why I think I've come into this from working in the HR world. It's an application process. Do you meet the essential criteria? If you don't, and you don't want to make it fit because it's not right for your business, walk away.
Very sound advice. If you look at the opportunity cost it takes to fill something in, and you may not get anywhere with it, and you really know you're not going to, you might be better off taking that time and either going out networking to get some more work, or putting it into your marketing, or just delivering on your business. Sue, any other advice in this sort of area around that perennial juggle of time versus, you know, return on investment for what small business owners have to do to get their funding?
Yeah, I think quite just what Rachel was saying is, you know, like actually look at, is it going to give you what you require? And if not, you know, what are your other opportunities? Because it might actually be that you need to look at a different form of lending rather than it being grant funding or something like that. And so again, the one thing that, and I did mention it last week, so kind of apologies that I'm saying it again in one way, but I just always try and say, you know, try and give yourself even like, you know, half an hour every week where you are working, you know, on your business, not in your business. And there is a little difference. It's about that thing of giving you time to actually just analyze what's going on and actually be able to see a pathway forward, because, you know, that old adage, you can't always see the wood for the trees. And so don't be a busy fool as well. Just kind of sometimes step away.
Sound advice, thank you. There's a slight build on that with coming to the question and answer from one of our attendees around if we receive funding, does it have to be spent on specific initiatives, or do you have to prove what the money's been used for? And I think I would answer that one with, it depends. And we're going to say that quite a lot this morning. If it's grant funding it's unrestricted, so it could be that you work in the voluntary sector and you've got some unrestricted funding in. What it means is very literally, it is not restricted in how you spend it. They want to see good governance around it, but it could be for salaries, it could be for rent, but it's quite unlikely. Normally, if you do get funding, it will be for a specific initiative that you've already outlined, or it'll be for a capital asset. So it'll be for a lump of kit, frankly. It means that way it actually adds value to your business because your business now owns this asset. It's not just disappearing off onto, subscriptions or rent or bills. That's not really what it's designed for. It's there to help you grow your business. So often you do have to show what you've spent it on. There's a process called defrayal, which is part of the funding kind of the proof point. So have I gone through? Do I own it? Because otherwise I could have sold it on eBay. So it's that sort of, it's good practice. If you think about it, it feels very onerous. There's a lot of paperwork to fill in, but often this is public finance. This is money we can't say, actually, I really need a company car and it needs to have leather seats and it needs to be really fancy. No, but if you really need a larger van to take your kit, to a construction site, and you're actually employing people, and maybe you've got a landscape gardening business and it's so busy you need 3 more lawnmowers and whatever, then actually you can prove that you're growing a business and you're recruiting people too. So you just think about it sensibly, as to putting that barometer in. Would I be happy if I saw public funding being spent on X? And if you're not, then it's not the right thing, to spend it on. So it's just about balance. I've got a question about investing money back in. So when we talk about investment, often it's external investment, but there is also the alternative of it just being our own money. So you might have taken a redundancy payment and decided to start a business. You could be working alongside your side hustle, and then suddenly it's going to become, your full-time business. Rachel, I know you said you were working part-time at the beginning. Would you recommend people investing all their money back into the business if they have a full-time job? And what would be your advice around there?
It depends. My favourite word too. It really does depend on your circumstances and how risk averse you are. I'm very risk adverse. So I went self-employed after a long career in the voluntary and community sector, where I learned how to write grants and found that I really liked the competitive nature of it. I love to win. I'm a really bad loser. But I was worried about going self-employed, even though I come from a family of self-employed people. I've seen firsthand when I was growing up, how much my dad sacrificed for that. And I wasn't really sure I wanted that, although I think I was basically unemployable anyway, the level that I'd got to in the charity world. So I did get part-time jobs because I was always convinced that it was going to stop, because my business started because someone asked me to write a bid for them and it won. And it happened like a snowball effect, which I now realise isn't rare within self-employment land, but it was to me at that time. So I was forever thinking it was going to finish at some point, so that I still had a mortgage to pay, still wanted to go out, still wanted to go on holiday. So I got a part-time job, waited for the self-employment to dry up, and it never did. I got a part-time contract for 2 years with the local university here, and I loved that. But it came to a crossroads where I had to make a decision. But what it enabled me to do, my part-time job supported the development of my business. I made mistakes. It enabled me to buy the kit that I needed. It enabled me to go to networking groups. It enabled me to live. But as I said earlier, I then decided I was going to go full time, but I'd taken my eye off the ball in terms of managing my numbers because I had my part-time job to rely on. So it's all about what you want to do with the time and your money. I've always had a pot of money to save for a rainy day. In the early days of my business, I saved every month from every sale a percentage for the tax man. The first thing I ever did when I went self-employed was get an accountant, because I was so worried that I would do things wrong. So it is useful to do it that way. It can spread you incredibly thin. And I required a friend to say to me after the 2 years, you said you were going to do this as in self-employment full time, you make your mind up, because it was so easy to stay with the part-time job because it was safe. So it depends on your circumstances. And I have this conversation with people who want to set up social enterprises and charities. It's like, how are you going to pay your bills, and startups generally, how are you going to pay your bills while you're doing this?
Yeah. Thank you. And Sue, in all your years of working in finance, what have you seen on the sort of small business landscape with how people approach this point?
I think what Rachel just said is absolutely right. I've seen it go a couple of different ways where people have had an opportunity that they simply can't resist, or it is they've almost fallen into it because it's something that they really, really love doing and want to make a business out of it and seen a business opportunity. But I think the thing is, it's about, I have seen it quite often where, like exactly as Rachel did, they had an existing job that will then allow them to put money into the business to actually kind of get it off the ground and start, and then walk away from a previous job. And from that viewpoint, it is really difficult. I'm not going to sit here, I'm self-employed myself. It isn't always straightforward. And, you do think, crikey, where's the next thing coming in from and stuff like that. And probably the one kind of piece of advice going slightly off on piece in it is, it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. So sitting here and thinking, right, I'm going to be able to be at this point in 6 months' time, you just might not be. And that's why, again, it's really important to know your numbers, know where you are, know what you're forecasting, and actually track against it. And you've got to be, I'm sure it was Rachel just used the word, or maybe yourself, Emma, you've got to be resilient. You are going to get some knockbacks. You are going to get some things where you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself down a bit, and go again. But if you have a really good, solid, business plan that you're working towards as well, just keep checking where you are against that business plan as well. And things will absolutely come, and as much as you can remain positive, be positive as well.
Definitely. And this is a great support group as well. So lots of the, your chambers of commerce, your local sort of business networks, make friends, make sure you've got people around you. And all of the Small Business Britain community is fantastic at providing that sort of that warm hug when you need it. And sometimes it is a cup of tea and this is awful, I hate this, what can I do? And other times it's, you know what, I did something and it was really good. But you have to remember to celebrate, because we're so bad at that. We just go, yeah, okay, great, move on, panic, keep it all coming in. And sometimes you have to just stop and go, you know what, I am actually going to reward myself for this because I've worked hard. So
totally.
You mentioned, Sue, around forecasting. We had a question come in into the Q&A around feeling more confident in your forecasting when you're looking for funding. So I know this is a real challenge for a lot of businesses, especially when you're new, because we draw a graph and say, right, in month 1, I'm going to get this, and then this, and this, and this. And we draw this nice straight line that goes, by the end of the year, I'm going to be here. But then next year, bigger, bigger, bigger. 2 years in, you're like, oh, God, this is lumpy. This is hard. As you say, it might be seasonal. It might be the fact that we didn't allow for our own holidays or going off sick. Nobody pays that for us anymore. So we have to be really careful and make sure we're very honest. And you've both described your journey in being very pragmatic and risk averse. And I think probably we're on this funding call this morning because we all have a very naturally risk averse approach, and we're very cautious. We're not going to suddenly go, yeah, get rid of all your business and sell 90% of it to somebody. We're kind of very practical and pragmatic. So if we think about the forecasting for people, how important is it to have very accurate forecasting? And of course, it is a bit of a finger in the wind. But how do you feel, Stu, I'll come to you on this one. Do investors really look that hard, or do they take a leap of faith? Or, what are your thoughts?
They do look, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think when we go to investors, whether that's lenders or personal investors, they should be looking. And if they're not looking, they need to give their head a wobble. And it's a bit like, right. So, but the thing is, as you quite rightly said, a forecast is simply that. It's a forecast. It might go lumpy. It might change. the biggest thing I look at is when I'm looking at things coming to me is it realistic? And if it's not realistic, well, actually, hang on a minute. And the challenge I give back to people coming to me, Emma, is saying, where did you get your figures from? What are you basing it on? So I have a guy who has a gym. So he wants to expand and do something a little bit differently. And I've said, so where have you got the new numbers from? You know, have you done a poll? Do you know any? And sometimes it can be, well, I just know. So I'm like, well, how do you know that piece of kit costs that amount of money? Well, I think it's this. Well, actually think isn't good enough. Go and research and tell me exactly how much that piece of kit is. Get a quote for it. Tell me that this one piece of kit is going to cost you, you know, £1,000 plus VAT. Potentially, don't forget the VAT, because that can bite you in the bum. You know, so actually it's not £1,000 suddenly, you know, it's near, you know, a lot more. And if you times that up by 10 pieces of kit. So it's about that thing of then, and equally things like, you know, insurances. So, you know, you've put in it's £10 a month. Really? Where did you get that figure from? You know, and so in answer to the question, I mean, yes, they will look at it, but I think it's very much around kind of how have you arrived at that? I have a young lady who's just starting out in business, done a marvelous business plan, is definitely going to be utilising Amazon and eBay. The data she's been able to get from Amazon is honestly unbelievable. And I actually just said to her, how have you got all this? And she went, oh, it's readily available. You're allowed to utilise it. And so for her business plan, when I read it, honest to goodness, it's the best business plan for a first time one I've ever seen, because of the level of detail she went in and how she justified everything. And that's the thing, you know, the bit that I always do is if somebody comes to me and it feels a bit airy-fairy and a bit too woolly, I will ask some challenging questions of, you know, again, going back to what you said, where did you get that from? How did you find that out? What about this? The more you can kind of evidence it and say, I've looked on, and I'm just going to use a gym one as example. You know, I've looked on Concept. I know that a Concept 2 rower is £895. That's my data. You know, people then you take much more like, oh, they've done their research. They know what they're talking about. If you're going to tell me a Concept row is 500 quid, well, it isn't. And I know it's not, you know, and don't underestimate that the lender or the investor will also go and actually occasionally do a little bit of research too, just to kind of validate it. So I'd say, you know, it is a forecast. You cannot possibly always get that forecast right. You just simply can't. It is a bit of a wind kind of thing, finger in the wind. But also the other part of it is utilising, you mentioned it before, Emma, utilise your support network around you. Ask an accountant, you know, and if they're saying to you, hang on a minute, that's way off the mark, you know, or if your accountant's helping you do it, you know, it's sometimes worth paying the accountant a few £100s to actually do it with you if you're unsure. But there's some amazing templates out there that you can use as well and fill in. So yeah, hope that helps.
Brilliant advice. Thank you. And I often see people even cutting corners, thinking they don't have to ask for as much as they do. So when you talk about gym equipment, actually go to an investor with a really solid set of kit that's going to last you. Don't go and get retail. Don't get domestic quality products, because they're not going to last. You might not even have the right insurance on them if you're using them in a commercial in a business sort of quantity, but actually they're just going to fall apart. So your accountant is really important here when you look at how you want to break down that asset. So do you want to lease it? Do you want to rent it? Do you want to split the payments? Or is it right to buy it out, you know, buy it up front? A second-hand van versus a new van. Do you want to buy it as one lump sum, or should you be leasing it? So often people think, I need the money because I need to be able to buy something, but you don't always have to buy it. So just look at all of the options. And I think that helps with your cash flow forecasting too. And just be, as you say, it's a forecast. I'm looking out the window. We were supposed to have all this rain. Well, we haven't got all the rain, but it's grey. So I don't know what I need to wear when I go out later. But it's a forecast. It's not right now. So investors understand this. Just be honest and just keep revisiting it. And if something comes in and there's a blip, explain what the blip is. That's absolutely fine. As long as you can mitigate it again in the future, then, you know, people understand business is business. So it changes. Rachel, can I ask you another dark art question, please? As long as a piece of string. How many funding or grant applications or tenders can I submit as a small business?
You can submit as many as you like, but it's not the number, it's the quality of them. And I often, you know, with either of them, you've got to then deliver. And these things, as Sue's already, take longer than you thought. They can also take longer to process. So even though you might say, well, I'm going to start on the 1st of September, the purse holders can take a lot longer, and there's very little that you can often do about that. You're in their hands. So for me, it's more about finding the right fit. And just so that everybody understands just how challenging this is. So I do this for a living, yet I've lost count the number of frogs that I've had to try to kiss to be able to find funding for Ask the Chameleon, but also for another business that I run. I'm not in the right postcode. I'm a solo business owner that works from home. I don't do the right thing. I don't want to employ people. I've had enough of that one in my HR career. I'm quite happy being me. I don't consider myself to be a lifestyle business. Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I'm over 50, but that's not the priority in my, you know, there's all these different things. And what causes that to happen is that sometimes then when you find one that you're eligible for, you get so excited, you think, well, I've got to have it. I've got to have it because it's the only one that I'm eligible for. But actually, it's still not the right fit. And I have recently had some funding for Ask the Chameleon to do some redevelopment work, but they wanted my inside leg measurement, you know, more or less. I gave them copies of my bank statements. I had to have 3 quotes of each item. It took weeks. And like you said, Emma, could I have used that better in going out to meetings and finding clients? Very probably. But I also believe it keeps me sharp as a bid writer, because I really do have that personal experience. So I would advise everybody not to chase the money or the number of things, to chase the fit between what you want to do and what the money is there to enable, to facilitate, or the tender opportunity. Look at it from that point of view.
That's really helpful. I think you should get a feeling when you read it and go, that looks like it's right for me. Because I'm not going to try and pretend I'm either side of 50 to try and fit it in, because it's binary. So you're in or you're out. So don't think people are flexible on these pots of funding. They're very, very, very tightly guarded to make sure certain audiences get access to them. Those audiences change. It does depend on postcode. It does depend on whether you're an underserved community. And actually, there's a lot of money for, community X to be able to access or grow businesses. But then are you the right size of business? It's not an easy answer. You just have to be, constantly kind of researching, as you say, sign up for the newsletters, make sure you're looking at sort of government grants online. There's no one source of the truth either. It does take quite a long time.
I'd also say that be careful what you wish for, because you're taking somebody else's money, whether that's a loan from the bank, whether that's grant finance, whether that's investment. You are inviting somebody into your business. And if you don't want to share your information, if you don't want them to see under the hood, then don't ask. If you do and you want their money, then expect them to ask questions, expect them to want, particularly with investors and angel investors, which are not my area of expertise, but they will suggest things and make changes. You are giving up an element of control of your business. If that's not for you, then don't go there. Find an alternative way. You're resilient, you're agile, you're creative. Find something that works for you. Ask around with your friends, find what works for you. Grant finance and those sorts of things, going on Dragon's Den isn't for everybody, and there's a reason for that.
Yes.
Also, Rachel, just as you were saying there as well about, under the bonnet kind of thing, I often end up saying to people, you've not given me all your bank statements. And they go, you haven't? I go, no, I can see that there's a transaction that comes in from account ending in 2620. And they're like, oh, that's just my savings account. Yeah, well, I need to see that too. And the reason is because exactly that, the lenders will want to see every single bank account. So my cynical head on it is the fact that actually the reason they're asking for that is, are you hiding something? Or are you hiding a huge pot of money? that you don't want them to know about? Or is it that actually you've got some finance going through there that you've neglected to mention? And people genuinely do forget sometimes what loans have got going out. So that's not a criticism. But it literally is, you know, I will say to you, I need your bank account details for every single bank account you've got. And I think people genuinely think I'm joking. And then they go, no, I can see you've not sent me this one. And they're like, how did you know that was there? And it's like, because I can see you transfer into it. And it's just like, so I try and get that up front to save then you having that issue with a lender. But you're quite right, they will look at it all. And you might think of saying, particularly if you're a limited company, because some of you still might be a limited company, even though we're small businesses. You might say, well, but it's okay, I'm an employee. Well, yeah, you are, but still, they want to know actually what is going in and out of that account, you know, and can you afford it? That's the other thing as well. When we touched on it before, Emma, slightly saying it's all very well, but actually, can your business afford to repay this funding? And you know, the other thing is, this is a really harsh reality. Credit isn't a given right. You know, it really isn't. You know, we live in a culture in a society in a country where credit is relatively freely available. You know, and people will have different views on credit and stuff as well. But you know, you will always find that the banks and the big banks and we call them a tier 1 lender. So people like your Lloyds of the world and people like that will always have the most favourable rates because they do. But if you've got some problems with your own credit history or credit history in the business, there will be usually, not always, but usually lenders who will help you. But just bear in mind, if you're getting offered higher interest rates, it's usually because it's more risky. And so the lower interest rate tends to be that the lender sees you as less of a risk. Higher interest rates mean that they tend to think that you're a higher risk. So just be mindful of that.
Really helpful, thank you. And something I've seen on a bank account level as well with sole traders is that they use their personal bank account for the business. So I would always say just no, never do it. However, I understand a lot of people start that way. But the problem you have is that you can't then take funding into that personal bank account because you tell me if it's not going to be paid on your gas bill or, you know, you're shopping versus the business. So look at it very sensibly and set your business up, even in a very simplistic way, to make sure you have separate bank accounts, that you can separate it out, because some people have asked that question around the sort of where the money goes, you know, are your assets at risk, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of, I think you just have to see it as a business, because if you want to take money in, you also have to accept that people are going to ask those questions and look under the bonnet, and you shouldn't really have anything to hide. If you do, then you know you're looking in the wrong place for the funding. Maybe sort of do the housekeeping, keep things tidy, and actually make sure you're fit to go out, you know, to ask for the funding. Sue, here's a question that I think will resonate with a lot of people. Would an investor, or it could also be a lender, be interested in a solopreneur who's got great ideas, as they all do, but they don't really have the funds or the time to bring it to life?
Good question. I think you'd probably find that a lender wouldn't, in all honesty, because I think that would have to be somebody that was more of an investor, you know, like a private investor rather than a lender. What a lender will always want is for you to put some money, I'm going to word it like this, money where your mouth is. And the reason for that is they want to know that if something does go wrong, it's going to hit you in the pocket as well as them. You know, so you'll always see things like, you know, lending opportunities of whereby if somebody was going to buy premises, for argument's sake, they want you to put up a much higher deposit than they do if it's buying in your residential personal name, because it is business. And again, they want to see that, you know, you're really serious about it. Why would any lender or investor say to you, okay, yeah, we'll give you 100% of the money, and if it all goes wrong, we'll take the risk? Where is your passion in it, and where is your investment in that, to say, actually, I so believe in this that actually I want to make it work, and I'm prepared to put, as I just coined the phrase, my money where my mouth is. And I think that's really important that we understand that, you know, a lender is unlikely to give 100% of the borrowing to do something, unless it's a startup loan. And that tends to be quite different. Startup loans, they tend to be able to give up to £25,000 per person. And so yes, so that's slightly different. But yeah, don't kind of sit there and think that you're going to get all of the money given to you on a plate, because you know it isn't. And that, I think it's really hard, Emma, to be honest with you, of going, I've got this great idea, but I don't have the funds to get it off the ground. But yeah, it's not unusual for somebody to ask you to put some money in initially and actually get off. I don't think it matters in the nicest sense who the person is. You know, I think everybody's business probably started from a bright idea, you know, so actually, you know, it's about just kind of, again, having the passion to drive it forward sometimes. And it might be that you have to just run before you can walk a little bit as well.
Yes. You've got to prove it, as you say. You have to show it can work. And I've got it to a point where it's working, but it's too small. I want to grow the business.
Yeah.
Now I can look at funding for the next stage.
Absolutely.
Rather than a leap of faith, can I please have some money to maybe do something, but I really don't know what it is yet.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Again, it's public money. So how would you feel if people were spending it badly? You just have to be very, you know, very realistic about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got time just for a few more questions, and we obviously got hundreds of questions. So, Rachel, this is something that's, I think, might be beneficial for people. I know you work in the sort of the bids and tendering space. Do you ever see, or do you advise your clients in any way around the size of tendering? So what I mean by that is, if my revenue for my business is broadly small business, it's say £50,000 a year, and I've seen a bid I really want to go for £200,000, would you say, brilliant, that's going to grow your business? Or do you think that's quite risky in terms of what it's going to do for me?
Okay. You can apply this sort of formula to grant finance as well. And before I answer that, the important thing to say is very few grants are 100% of your total project cost. And what I mean is the amount of money that you need, you often have to put your own skin in the game. So, you know, it'll be a 60% from the grant, 40% of your own money. So it's very rare to get 100% for anything anymore. I work on a 3 times your turnover, your revenue. And the reason for that is that I do see quite a number of tenders that have limits. So I'll give you an example because it's easier to do it this way. I have a client, we apply for skills bootcamp tenders from the Department of Education. And they will have a formula. So the pot is millions, blows my mind on a regular basis how many noughts there are. But each bidder, because this is a framework, is restricted to a certain amount of money dependent on their current turnover and their sales. And we tend to use a typical rule of thumb of 3. So if I take your example of yours is 50,000, then I would advise you to go for a contract no more than 150. And the reason for that is that it's about risk. It's about you being a safe pair of hands. It's about their view very dispassionately and separate from you as to what they think a business can deliver. They don't know you. They've had their fingers burnt on many occasions. And this is the formula that they've come up with. And it's their money and they get to choose. If the bid was £200,000 over 4 years, then I might say to you, yeah, we'll go for that, because year on year, it's the same. And you would need to convey in your application how this is going to positively impact your business and what risk strategy you will have in place to mitigate any problems. So things like staff leaving, you know, not having the right systems in place for the monitoring of the tender or the grant or whatever it is. When I worked in the voluntary and community sector, we created a separate trading arm and we exploded within 12 months. And within 12 months, I'd gone from 1 member of staff to 15. I can't even begin to tell you how stressful that was. Now we delivered because I'd brought staff over. But if we had nothing in place, we would have really struggled to have delivered that. And what you don't want in a tender situation is to default on that tender, because then it can preclude you from applying for ones in the future. The same with a grant. You do not want that to be clawed back, because you will declare it in your next application. And if I'm sitting there as the person with a small amount of money to give out, I really want to give it to lots of businesses and I might really like your idea, but out of everybody, you've defaulted, you've had things clawed back, then I'm going to use that as a way to make my life easier and discount you. So, you know, be careful in the handling of these. The procurers are very, very busy, often very stretched people. And whilst you can communicate with them once you're into delivery, you know, at the end of the day, it's a business transaction relationship. You've said that you're going to do something, you need to do it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So we've got lots of questions still that we can't get to. We've got lots of topics. We could honestly be here all day happily, and also some very niche topics. So I'll try and answer one or two in typed in the Q&A. I think the sort of, to wrap up, really, it'd be good to just get your final thoughts. There's one question that's come in which I do want to just highlight, and that is it possible to get sort of business coaching for small businesses, especially when, you know, finances are going to be tight? And of course, with this session, you will be able to get 2 hours of mentoring through Small Business Britain and the Lloyds Bank Academy. So you'll get an email for information on that. So obviously, take up any advice and any of those things that you can to help your business. Just to wrap up a little bit, would just to get sort of final thoughts. I think it's so diverse. Often we can go, yeah, we've answered this question on this topic, but there are so many different areas, whether you're in the voluntary sector, whether you're a sole trader, whether you're a limited company, all of the others. So just to sort of get your final reflections, I suppose, or top tips. Sue, how would you sort of wrap up this morning?
So I would just say, it links back slightly to what we did last week as well, is know your numbers, know your business, know where you want to head towards. As you said before, Emma, make the most of your network you have around you. Go to networking meetings, go to, whether that's ones like, you know, there's Business Networking International, there's ones that are more subtle than that as well. Get, you know, somebody else I've noticed put Find Your Tribe in it, and it is almost Find Your Tribe. But ask people who have been in your position. There is never, I mentioned before, there's never a silly question. And so, you know, also just take time to actually like take a step back, look at where you need to go. What actions do you need to take? In the nicest sense, you're not the first person in business, and we won't be the last either. Even with the experience I've got, there's still stuff that comes up and I go, oh, hang on a minute, what about, you know, scratchy head moment. So, you know, everybody has to ask questions. So my advice would be, give yourself time, know where you're heading, be positive, know when something's gone wrong, what are the learnings you can take from that and how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And as I say, utilize the network of free professional advice around you as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rachel, what are your final reflections?
So I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. I would add, it's not you if you're not eligible. It doesn't mean that you're not a great business. You're fantastic. Term success in what it means to you. It's not all about multi-million-pound, six-figure months, years, whatever. Don't be labeled by somebody else. And if you're not eligible, smile and walk away. You know, it's fine. You can do your business in the way that you do. You know, you do you. It's not an issue. Please do know your numbers. I struggle really hard with that, and I've recently moved to a finance software. It's made all the difference. Very excited about that. Still don't understand it completely. I am a work in progress, and that's okay too. I'm not meant to know absolutely everything, and there are experts out there. So do find your people. There will be different people for different things. Ask them about money. We are so bad for not talking about money and how we make ends meet and all those sorts of things. And I really do feel very strongly about that. And I think, you know, I'll have been in business 10 years next year, and it's taken me a long time to be comfortable in my skin and go, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to do that. Particularly on the money side of things, it's like a bit of a dirty secret, and it shouldn't be. Do your research. So if you are in the voluntary and community sector, find your council for voluntary service. They are fantastic people. They have information about grants. Look for Social Enterprise UK for social entrepreneurs, and a fantastic scheme called Unlimited, unltd.org.uk, I think. They're fantastic as well. When it comes to freelancers and commercial businesses, come here to Small Business Britain. They are awesome, but also the British Library Network. Go to your local authority. Do not expect it to land in your lap. If you want it, you have to go and find it, but make sure it fits what your business is and what you want to do, because I absolutely guarantee you, if you shoehorn yourself into it, it will come back at some point and bite you on the arse. And it will be the most painful lesson, and you won't do it again, but I don't want you to get to that stage.
Really sensible. Thank you. Thank you. I think if I was to wrap up, I spend a lot of my time with small and scaling businesses on business planning, on sort of resilience and that sort of thing. And what often comes up is the fact that we only have so much time and energy. So if something looks too good to be true, it is. So if it might be easier to just stop, just think about, if I had all this time to fill in all these applications, and yes, doing them is great because it gives you a good look in at your own business, and it helps you kind of work out, you know, to do that kind of stock check, as it were, of what my business is. But is it better for me to do that, or go out and do some marketing, do some networking, or maybe just hustle a little bit? You know, don't sit there thinking it's going to come to you and it's going to be easy, because once you do have that money, if it comes in, you've got to really guard it and govern it well. So just look at it sensibly and go, well, how am I going to spend my time? If I'm only going to get £2,000, you know, of a grant, can I earn it instead? Maybe it's easier. So just stop and take a minute and try and make your life as straightforward as possible, because, you know, we do a lot as small business owners. In fact, we do all of it. So we are all small business owners ourselves, and we get it. So thank you ever so much, Rachel and Sue. That's given me a boost for the week as well. Some food for thought from the charity side, business side, everything. And everybody here, I really hope you got lots out of that. Had some lovely comments in the chat. Please keep the conversation going by emailing Small Business Britain team if you have any questions, hello@Small Business Britain, and connect with us on LinkedIn. We are here, we run small businesses, we love to help. So please do stay in touch.